Elena Brooks believed she was safe. That's not an assumption. That's a fact. She trusted the man who slept beside her, the man who spoke softly, the man who told everyone he loved her. There were no threats, no bruises, no warning signs loud enough to make her run, just exhaustion, confusion, and a growing feeling that something wasn't right, that she kept explaining away. When she died, it was ruled an accident. A fire, a quiet road, bad luck. Her husband cried at the funeral. He held her family's hands. And for years, no one questioned him. But what if the most dangerous crimes aren't committed in rage? What if they're committed patiently, carefully, by someone who knows exactly how long trust takes to kill? This is not a story about a monster hiding in the shadows. This is a story about a man who hid in plain sight, and the woman who never knew she was being erased until it was too late. For nearly 2 decades, everyone believed this was a tragic accident, a terrible chain of events, bad timing, a quiet road, a fire that burned too fast for anyone to stop it. The husband cried at the funeral, not politely, not briefly. He cried until his shoulders shook, until his voice cracked, until people looked away, uncomfortable with how real his grief seemed. He stood beside her family, accepted their comfort, held her brother's hand, and wept. And for 17 years, no one questioned him, because no one wants to believe that evil can look that sincere. No one wants to believe that the man everyone trusted had already rehearsed the murder weeks before it happened. In the early 1990s, Mason Hale learned something important about people. If you speak softly, they lean in. If you appear helpful, they stop asking questions. If you look tired, they assume you're trying your best. Mason never raised his voice, never argued in public, never seemed hurried. He worked in healthcare, a profession that came with built-in trust. People assumed he cared. What they didn't notice was how often his life erased itself. A new city every few years, new co-workers who didn't know old stories, new relationships that never lasted long enough to leave fingerprints, and all was a reason, a misunderstanding, a bad breakup, a job that just wasn't the right fit. He wore explanations the way other people wore coats, only when needed, never for long. By the time Mason arrived in northern Arizona, he looked settled, grounded, normal. She was 31. Her name was Elena Brooks, a registered nurse with a steady job and a small circle of people she trusted completely. Elena believed in predictability. She paid her bills early. She called her sister every Sunday. She believed that if something felt wrong, it probably was. They met at work. Mason noticed how Elena stayed late to finish her charts. Elena noticed how he remembered details she hadn't said out loud. He asked questions that felt thoughtful. He listened without interrupting. It felt safe. Their relationship moved quickly, but not recklessly. No shouting, no dramatic breakups, no warning signs anyone could later point to and say, "There, that was it." When they married, Elena's family relaxed. She had found someone dependable, someone calm, someone who would take care of her. But safety, when manufactured carefully enough, can feel identical to love. The first change was so small, Elena didn't mention it. She was tired. Not the kind of tired sleep fixes, but the kind that makes your thoughts feel padded, as if they have to travel through fog before reaching your mouth. Elena forgot conversations, lost her train of thought mid-sentence, stopped driving long distances. She laughed it off. Everyone gets tired. But the fatigue deepened. Elena stopped trusting her memory, stopped making plans weeks in advance, stopped believing her body was doing what she asked of it. Soon, Mason began helping. He reminded Elena of appointments, tracked her symptoms, spoke for her when words came slowly. Doctors listened. After all, Mason worked in healthcare. He sounded informed, concerned. He suggested stress, then anxiety, then something neurological. He kept notes, detailed ones. And slowly, quietly, Elena's world narrowed to the size of their home. She depended on him, not because she chose to, but because she no longer trusted herself not to. One coworker noticed something odd. At work, Elena still functioned, focused, alert. But at home, she declined. The symptoms followed Elena home. The thought passed through the coworker's mind, then disappeared, because suspecting a husband who never left his wife's side felt unthinkable. Elena's sister felt it more sharply. Something was wrong. Not dramatic wrong, not obvious wrong, just wrong. Elena's voice sounded flat on the phone. Her laughter arrived late. She repeated herself. "I'm just tired," Elena kept saying. Her sister suggested a second opinion. Mason declined. He said stress made things worse. He said Elena needed consistency. He said too many doctors would confuse her. And everyone stepped back, because pushing felt rude. And politeness has buried more people than violence ever has. 3 weeks before Elena Brooks died, something happened that no one noticed. Mason drove their car off a rural service road late at night. No injuries, no police report. He blamed a deer. Later, investigators would understand. He wasn't testing the car. He was testing the road. The isolation. How long it took for another vehicle to pass. How dark it became when the engine stopped. On the night Elena died, the highway was empty. No streetlights, no cameras, no witnesses close enough to matter. The car came to a stop. What happened next was described as an accident. Fire, smoke, heat. An off-duty motorist pulled over to help. Mason told him there was no one else inside. He said it calmly. He said it again. Moments later, the fire spread faster than expected. Elena never woke up. At the hospital, doctors were confused. Mason had no burns, no elevated heart rate, no signs of trauma. His body looked like someone who had watched something terrible, not survived it. Still, he complained of pain. At the funeral, Mason wore a brace. He cried loudly. He leaned into Elena's brother. Her brother believed him. For years, investigators noticed small things. No skid marks, minimal collision damage, fire patterns that didn't quite make sense. But nothing was enough. The case was closed. Accidental death. Elena Brooks became a line in a report. Instead of a woman, someone failed to protect. Within months, Mason collected insurance money. 6 figures. He bought new things, went new places, met new people, and told anyone who asked that he was finally learning how to live again. 3 years later, in another state, another woman would describe the same exhaustion, the same confusion, the same bitter taste lingering after meals. And when investigators finally laid the timelines side by side, they would understand something chilling. What happened to Elena Brooks was not the end. It was the beginning. What happened to Elena Brooks was not the end. It was permission. 3 years later, Mason Hale was living under a different sky. Different roads, different neighbors, different routines, but the same quiet patience. Her name was Lydia Grant. She was older than Elena, more financially secure, more careful with trust. She had survived a long divorce and promised herself she would never ignore warning signs again. That promise would almost cost her life. Mason told Lydia he had lost his wife in a tragic accident. He spoke about grief the way people speak about fragile glass, slowly, carefully, never too long. He said the road was dark. He said the fire spread too fast. He said he still woke up some nights shaking. Lydia believed him. People who have known pain often recognize it in others. Or at least, They think they do. Mason insisted they take things slowly. No rushing, no pressure. What Lydia didn't know was that Mason wasn't being gentle. He was mapping her. He learned when she woke up, when she slept deeply, which days she forgot to eat. He learned what medications she took, what foods upset her stomach, how long it took her to feel dizzy if she skipped a meal. He learned how much her life was worth on paper. The first thing Lydia noticed was the taste, a bitterness that lingered at the back of her tongue after meals. Metallic. Wrong. She blamed cookware, then water, then stress. The fatigue came next, not exhaustion, something heavier. Her legs felt distant. Her thoughts arrived late. Her balance slipped in small, embarrassing ways. Mason already had explanations. He suggested hormones, then anxiety, then autoimmune issues. He said it kindly. He went with her to doctor appointments. He spoke for her when she hesitated. Doctors listened. After all, Mason worked in healthcare. One night, Lydia woke up on the living room floor. The lights were off, the house silent. She didn't remember lying down. Mason said she must have fainted. He said it gently. He said it while making tea. Another night, Lydia woke up in the passenger seat of her own car. The engine was off, the road unfamiliar, the trees too close. Her phone rang. The sound startled her awake enough to sit up. When Mason returned to the car, his face changed. "What are you doing awake?" he asked. Not relieved, not worried, angry. That was the moment Lydia stopped explaining things away. Not clarity, instinct. She began writing things down. Dates, meals, symptoms. She hid the notebook. Mason grew impatient. Money entered the conversation. He suggested merging accounts for convenience, then controlling expenses temporarily. He talked about insurance, about planning, about what would happen if something unexpected happened. The second attempt happened on the highway. Mason was driving. He claimed the steering wheel locked. The car accelerated, veered. Lydia grabbed the wheel. It worked perfectly. They landed in a ditch. Mason jumped out immediately, ran to the trunk. Inside were newspapers and a gas can. He screamed at Lydia to stay in the car. She didn't. She walked away. She called her attorney. That night, Mason claimed chest pain. While Lydia sat in the emergency room, he emptied their joint account. Lydia didn't confront him. She waited. She went to the police instead. What she said wasn't dramatic. It was careful. Measured, which made it harder to ignore. A detective listened, then another. When they reopened Elena Brooks' file, they didn't expect much. The case was old, evidence thin. But one thing remained: a preserved tissue sample. New forensic testing revealed sedatives. Elena Brooks had never been prescribed them. Mason Hale had access. That single fact unraveled everything. Patterns emerged. Insurance policies, vehicle fires, unexplained illnesses, controlled narratives. Other women came forward. Some spoke about money disappearing. Some about strange symptoms. Some about fear they couldn't name. Mason was arrested quietly. In the interrogation room, he was calm. He denied everything. He cried on cue. Paused when expected. At trial, Lydia testified. She described waking up disoriented, the bitterness, the anger in Mason's voice when she didn't die. Elena Brooks's sister testified about phone calls that felt wrong, about exhaustion that never lifted. Forensic experts explained the fire, the lack of skid marks, the staging. The jury listened. The verdict came quickly. Guilty. The sentence was long. Long enough that Mason Hale would likely die in prison. Elena Brooks' name was spoken aloud in court, finally. Not as an accident, but as a woman erased slowly, then violently. Lydia survived. But survival has weight. Trust does not return easily once it's been weaponized. People ask how no one saw it sooner. The truth is uncomfortable. Mason Hale didn't hide in darkness. He hid in politeness, in patience, in the silence where people hesitate to accuse. And that is the most terrifying part, because the most dangerous people are not the ones who rage. They are the ones who wait.